What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope all's good wherever you are. In this video, we're going to be looking at a great debate. This is put on by the Monk Debates. This is one of my favorite ones. I've seen this one a bunch of times, and I want to share with all of you. So on one side, we have some left-wing political activists, and on the other side, we're going to have some critical thinkers. Now, the first person that's going to speak here is Michael Eric Dyson. If you're not familiar with who he is an ordained minister, he's a radio host, he's a postmodernist professor, a very big political activist, and in my opinion, a gigantic race hustler. Let's get into it.
And I ain't seen nobody be a bigger snowflake than white men who complain. Mommy, they won't let us play and have everything we used to have under the old regime where we were right racists and supremacists and dominant and patriarchs and hated gays and lesbians and transsexuals that, yeah, you gotta share. This ain't your world, this everybody's world. And let me end by saying this. You remember that story from David Foster Wallace? Fish are going down, two fish are going, and an older fish comes in the opposite direction. He said, hello boys, how's the water? They swim on, they turn to each other, what the hell is water? Because when you're in it, you don't know it. When you're dominant, you don't know it. Nothing, Kaiser Soze said, is more interesting that the devil did than to make people believe he didn't exist. That's what white supremacy is.
Michael Eric Dyson, famous for saying a lot of big words, but not really actually saying much. This is what he does. He tries to make himself seem very smart. And don't get me wrong, he is a very smart man. But he puts on this show, and you can see the crowd is playing to it at the moment, right? But what he said there pretty much is that if you happen to be a white man, or I guess a white woman, and you have a problem with the Marxist narrative that's being pushed on you right now, well, that must be because you are an oppressor, because you're a misogynist, because you're a racist. That must be what it is. It couldn't just be that you disagree with them and you're against this narrative that they're trying to push. It couldn't just be that. It has to be because you have some ulterior motive to oppress people of a different color than you, which is total nonsense, really. But these people, these race hustlers, this is what they do. And you'll see right now the crowd is in his favor. They play to him, but this will shift towards the end of the video.
Well, I think it's one of the primal sins of identity politics players on the left and the right, just to be clear about that. Personally, since this has got personal at times, I'm no fan of the identitarian right. I think that anybody who plays a game, a conceptual game where group identity comes first and foremost, risks an exacerbation of tribalism. It doesn't matter whether it's on the left or the right. With regards to the idea of group rights, well, there's a fundamental, and this is something we've fallen into terribly in Canada, not least because we had to contend with the threat of Quebec separatism, but the idea of group rights is extraordinarily problematic because the obverse of the coin of individual rights is individual responsibilities. And you can hold an individual responsible, and an individual can be responsible. And so that's partly why individuals have rights. But groups, how do you hold a group responsible? I mean, the whole idea is it's not a good idea to hold a group responsible. First of all, it flies in the face of the idea of the sort of justice systems that we've laid out in the West that are essentially predicated first on the assumption of individual innocence, but also on the possibility of individual guilt, not group guilt. We saw what happened in the 20th century many, many times when the idea of group guilt was enabled to get a foothold, let's say, in the polity and in the justice system. It was absolutely catastrophic. And so, okay, fine, group rights. Well, how are you going to contend with the alternative to that, the opposite of that? Where's the group responsibility? And how are you going to hold your groups responsible? Well, we don't have to talk about that because we're too concerned with rectifying historical injustices, hypothetical and otherwise. And that's certainly not to say that there weren't any shortage of absolutely catastrophic historical injustices. That's not the point. The point is how you view the situation at the most fundamental level. And group rights are an absolute catastrophe, in my opinion.
The reason that Trump and Brexit in Britain and all kinds of nativists all over Europe are succeeding is not the triumph of the right, it's the catastrophic failure of the left. It's our fault. We absolutely... My point is not that I've turned to the right or anything like that, or that I'm nice and fluffy and want everybody to be decent. I'm saying political correctness. Resist. Fight. If you have a point of view, fight it in the proper manner, using democracy as it should be, not channels of education, not language. You know, it's so silly.
But Steve,
There's a chess rule, you know. In chess, the best move to play in chess is not the best chess move. It's the move your opponent least wants you to play. At the moment, you're being recruiting sergeants for the right. By annoying and upsetting, and instead of fighting, either fighting or persuading. But political correctness is a middle course that simply doesn't work.
Now, Stephen Fry is an old school liberal. I agree with a lot of what he says. I disagree with a lot of what he says. Kind of like most people, I guess. I fall very much more on the conservative side. But the old school liberals, it's kind of like RFK Jr. I don't agree that he's for reparations, but I do agree with him on a lot of things. Whereas, you know, this new wave of globalist liberals, these globalist Democrats, I disagree with, I would say, 99% of what's going on, what they're doing. So he's an old school liberal. He's an old school lefty. He's an atheist, but he's a very, very educated, very smart man. And what he's saying here is, yo, let's duke it out. Let's talk about this. Don't just be changing words. Don't get into the schools and the education system and start messing all that up. Let's talk about this, because there's times in history where the right, we know what it is when the right goes too far, right? We end up with Hitler and the Nazis. But the left, right now, we're seeing it. We're seeing it go too far. But these activists, these ideologues on the left, they don't want to admit that. They will fight it to the bone, when what they should be doing is saying, yeah, maybe we went too far. Maybe we need to pull back here and meet somewhere in the middle between both sides.
See, I obviously and ideally, and I think Michelle Goldberg does too.
I love the mansplaining. I'm enjoying it.
You're loving what?
The mansplaining that's going on.
Agree with the emphasis on individuals. What we're saying to you is that we have not been permitted to be individuals. We have not been permitted to exercise our individual autonomy and authority, and the refusal to do so, to recognize me as an individual, means when you roll up on me and I'm a 12-year-old boy in a park and you shoot first, in ways you do to black kids that you don't do to white kids, you are not treating that person as an individual. If we're living in a society where women are subject to aberrant forms of horrid, patriarchal, sexist, and misogynist behavior, you are not acknowledging the centrality of the individuality of women. You are treating them according to a group dynamic. And if we get beyond the ability of people on the right to understand the degree to which they have operated from the basis of benefit from group identity, without having said, I'll end by saying this. The great American philosopher Beyonce Knowles said that it has been said that racism is so American that if you challenge racism, you look like you're challenging America. We are challenging inequality. We are challenging the refusal to see me as an individual. When we overcome that, have at it, we're all on equal plane.
I think it's fine. I think it's good.
The pot is getting stirred here.
Michael Eric Dyson, the snake oil salesman. You'll see Stephen Fry call him that later in the video. This is what he does. Speak fast, speak loudly, use big words, some pre-written jokes that you have in there maybe, and play the race card, play the victim card, play the oppressed card. And we know in 2023, well, this was like 2022, 2021, yeah, victimhood is the new currency. And that is what this man does. He likes to play the victim. He is a snake oil salesman in a sense. Guys, if you like these videos, please consider smashing that thumbs up button. Would really help me out. Subscribe to the channel. Let's keep going.
So I've got a couple of questions.
So let's your side spoke, so I'm going to go to Jordan, then to you,
Let's
Michelle.
assume for a moment that I've benefited from my white privilege. Okay, so let's assume that. That's
a good
fine.
assumption.
That's what you would say. So, so let's say, here, let's get precise about this, okay?
Was that very individual of you?
Let's get precise about this, okay?
Let's get precise.
To what degree is my present level of attainment or achievement a consequence of my white privilege? And I don't mean sort of. I mean, do you mean 5%? Do you mean 15%? Do you mean 25%? Do you mean 75%? And what do you propose I do about it? How about a tax? How about a tax that's like specialized for me so that I can account for my damn privilege, so that I can stop hearing about it? Now, let's get precise about one other thing, okay? We'll get precise about one other thing. Now,
Precise?
Yeah, precise, yes. And so, if we can agree, and we haven't, that the left can go too far, which it clearly can, then how would my worthy opponents precisely define when the left that they stand for has gone too far? You didn't like equity, equality of outcome. I think that's a great marker. But if you have a better suggestion and won't sidestep the question, so let's figure out how I can dispense with my white privilege, and so that you can tell me when the left has gone too far, since they clearly can. And that's what this debate is about political correctness. It's about the left going too far. And I think it's gone too far in many ways. And I'd like to figure out exactly how and when, so the reasonable left could make its ascendance again and we could quit all this nonsense.
Jordan B. Peterson, one of the freaking goats of this stuff. And he mentions to Eric Dyson there, show me an example, and they never will. This whole debate, he'll ask a few times, and they don't want to do it. He says, show me an example of the left going too far. And he uses equality of outcome as a marker, just as a marker. And he's right about that. Equality of outcome was ludicrous. Now, equality of opportunity, we should all have the same opportunity, man or woman, Asian, black, white, that doesn't matter. We should all have the same opportunity to achieve stuff, but to expect equality of outcome when we all want different things and individuals will choose different things, and based on gender we choose different things, it doesn't work. So it's a good marker what he brings up here. And people on the left, they still want this. Now, he'll point to Stephen Fry and he'll say the reasonable left, which is what Stephen Fry is. Again, he reminds me of an RFK Jr. type of thing, where you won't agree, if you're on the right, you won't agree with everything he's saying, but he's a much better choice than the political activist, leftist ideologue or globalist that we have today, where he's sensible, right? You can make sense of it. You might have different points of view, but he's much more of a moderate. You can meet somewhere in the middle and you can have a good conversation, where you can't have a good conversation with somebody who's not willing to budge one step or give you any answer whatsoever.
Jordan's point about how does he, in a sense, get an equal voice in this debate back if it is implied that his participation brings with it this baggage of white privilege that doesn't allow him to see clearly the issues that are before us.
But that is to be complicit in the very problem itself terminologically. You're beginning at a point that's already productive and controversial. You're saying, how can he get his equality back? Who are you talking about? Jordan Peterson, trending #1 on Twitter? Jordan Peterson with an international bestseller? I want him to tweet something out about me in my book. Jordan Peterson, right? This is what I'm saying to you. Why the rage, bruh? You're doing well, but you're a mean, mad white man, and you're going to get us right. And I have never seen so much wine and snowflaking. There's enough wine in here to start a vineyard. And what I'm saying to you empirically and precisely, when you ask the question about white privilege, the fact that you ask it in the way you did, dismissive, pseudoscientific, non-empirical, and without justification, the truth is that white privilege doesn't act according to quantifiable segments. It's about the degree to which we are willing as a society to grapple with the ideals of freedom, justice, and equality upon which it's based. Number two, what's interesting to me, you're talking about not having a collective identity. What do you call a nation? Are you Canadian? Are you Canadian by yourself? Are you an individual, or are you part of a group? When America formed its union, it did so in opposition to another group. So the reality is that those who are part of group identities in politics deny the legitimacy and validity of those groups and the fact that they have been created thusly, and then have resentment against others. All I'm asking for is the opportunity. The quotation you talk about, the difference between equality of outcome and equality of opportunity, that's a staid and retried argument, hackneyed phrase derived from the halcyon days of the debate over affirmative action. Are you looking for outcomes that can be determined equally, or are you looking for opportunity? If you free a person after a whole long time of oppression and say now you are free to survive, if you have no skills, if you have no quantifiable means of existence, what you have done is liberated them into oppression. And all I'm suggesting to you, Lyndon Baines Johnson, one of our great presidents, said, if you start a man in a race 100 years behind, it is awfully difficult to catch up. So I don't think Jordan Peterson is suffering from anything except an exaggerated sense of entitlement and resentment, and his own privilege is invisible to him, and it's manifest with lethal intensity and ferocity right here on stage.
Jordan, I'm going to have to let you respond to that if you will.
Dyson likes to do this, right? Everything is race, everything is oppression. You only succeed or not succeed because of the color of your skin, which is just total nonsense. He brought up affirmative action, but thank God that's done with. Because, yeah, you think about the black kids that get into these universities, if they've worked hard to get there and they get into Harvard or something, and then people are saying, oh, well, you got in because of affirmative action. Like, nah, man, I got in because I worked my freaking ass off. Nobody wants to get in because of the color of their skin. And this was affecting the Asian community more than anybody else because the Asian community wasn't getting into these universities. They had to score like, 2 or 3 or 4 times higher than everybody to even be accepted. It wasn't really affecting the white community, but the Asian community was affected by affirmative action to a very high degree. And to say that Jordan Peterson, one of the most published, maybe the most published clinical psychologist ever, that he is that famous or that successful because of the color of his skin is nonsense. If anybody, like he got famous late in life, if anybody's put into work, it's Dr. Peterson. Let's get back to it.
Well, what I derive from that series of rebuttals, let's say, is twofold. The first is that saying that the radical left goes too far when they engage in violence is not a sufficient response by any stretch of the imagination, because there are sets of ideas in radical leftist thinking that led to the catastrophes of the 20th century, and that was at the level of idea, not at the level of violent action. It's a very straightforward thing to say you're against violence. It's like being against poverty. It's like, generically speaking, decent people are against poverty and violence. It doesn't address the issue in the least. And with regards to my privilege or lack thereof, I'm not making the case that I haven't had advantages in my life and disadvantages in my life like most people. You don't know anything about my background or where I came from, and it doesn't matter to you because fundamentally I'm a mean white man. That's a hell of a thing to say in a debate.
The crowd's turning on him. The crowd's turning on Dyson now.
Let me just say.
Very, very brief, because I want to move on to men and women. A good topic next.
The mean, mad white comment was not predicated upon my historical excavation of your past. It's based upon the evident vitriol with which you speak and the denial of a sense of equanimity among combatants in an argument. So I'm saying again, you're a mean, mad white man, and the viciousness is evident.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's reset.
You see the crowd turning on Dyson right now because Jordan Peterson, he's so good at these. I wish he would still do those one-on-one interviews that he used to do, but now everybody just tries to get a soundbite and bait him into stuff. So that's why he doesn't do them anymore. And good for him, but it's too bad for us because those conversations were really important. And what's going on here is the crowd is turning on Dyson because he's being very arrogant. And he says to Jordan Peterson, you speak with vitriol. But then he calls him an angry white man and brings race into it, where there was no need of it, especially in this type of debate. You don't have to bring race into it, especially for that conversation, because it didn't really apply. Even if you thought that Jordan Peterson was a mean man, the fact that he's white would have nothing to do with it. And Jordan Peterson right now, he's being sincere, he's being humble, he's to the point, he's speaking softly, and the crowd is responding to it. So let's get back into it.
Well, I think I'm going to point out 2 things again. The first is that my question about when the left goes too far still hasn't been answered. And then the second thing I'm going to point out is that, it's conceivable that I am a mean man. Maybe I'm meaner than some people and not as mean as others. I think that's probably more the case. But I would say the fact that race got dragged into that particular comment is a better exemplar of what the hell I think is wrong with the politically correct left than anything else that could have possibly happened.
Imagine the hurt, the anxiety, the insult that you might genuinely feel, according to what I felt was an appropriate comment of description at the moment of its expression. But imagine now those hurt feelings and
not hurt.
Okay, you feel great. You feel great about it.
That's really different. I'm not a victim. I'm not hurt. I'm appalled.
You're not hurt. Okay, you wouldn't be a victim. So what's interesting is that whatever non-traditional feelings of empathy you endure at this particular point, the point is, imagine then the horrors that so many others have had to put up with for so long when they are refused to acknowledge their humanity. Now, I take your point seriously.
So your group
let me finish. Let me finish, though. Let me finish.
To me.
Let me finish, sir.
That figures.
You see here, Eric Dyson, he's still trying to play the victim card. He's still trying to play the oppressed card, but he realizes that he's showing his hand. He showed his true colors by calling Jordan Peterson an angry white man. Because Jordan Peterson said, man, I'm not hurt. Like, it's not about my feelings. I'm just disappointed that you said that because there was no need to. We're having a good debate, and you had to bring race into it and oppression and make it about race as usual. These people are race hustlers, and a lot of these race activists, these black activists, or, pick a race, they're often racist people already. That's the definition of racism. Now, I know a lot of people don't think that you can be racist towards white people, but that is not the case. If you dislike somebody because of the color of their skin, you are indeed a racist. Now, let's flip the tables and imagine that Jordan Peterson had said that to Eric Dyson. He said, you're an angry black man. Canceled, hated. Now, the world would have heard about it, but because Jordan Peterson's white, you're allowed to say that, and that's what these race hustlers do. Let's get back to it.
What's more politically incorrect than a black intellectual going on Bill Maher and defending his ability to continue to have his show despite using the N-word? I, sir, believe in a politically incorrect version. When I go as a black Baptist preacher to chastise my fellow believers about their homophobia, that goes over like a brick cloud. When I come into arenas like this, I understand that my back is up against the wall. But I think...
Come and sit over here.
I want to sit on your lap. I want to sit on your lap in a while. But what I'm saying to you... But don't get excited. But what I'm saying to you...
Don't flatter yourself.
Oh, that's all right. I see how you've been looking at me. So what's interesting...
For you guys who don't know him, he's... gay, so that's why this little exchange was kind of funny to everybody. Now what we're going to look at is critical thinking by Jordan B. Peterson, Stephen Fry versus the activist, the political activist, because Jordan Peterson, as much as people tried to paint him to be far right, he's really not. He was always a little bit more conservative, but he was never like alt-right. And he got put into this box years ago by the left because he was fighting against, equality of outcome and all these leftist ideologies. But it didn't start off that way for him. If you listen to his old lectures, he wasn't some right-wing person. But he's willing to admit that he is more on the right, more on the conservative side. And he's willing to admit what it looks like when the right goes too far. Again, we've had, like the Nazis, what happened with the Jews. There's been lots of times in history where the right has gone too far, and we know what that looks like. And these two, Stephen Fry, Jordan Peterson, they're willing to say, okay, well, this is what happens. Now, we're not going to let that happen ever again. But what happens when the left goes too far? And this is the difference between, people who are critical thinkers and people that are just political activists. They do not want to say anything. They'll just say, well, I believe we go too far if people get killed or hurt, or like, yeah, obviously, because everybody agrees with that. Like, we don't want people to be dying on either side, so that's an easy one. But show us some examples, and they just can't do it.
Again, what I hear Mr. Peterson talking about as political correctness is something much more broad and much more much more fundamental to social change. And you're talking about, you want me to define, or one of us to talk about when the left goes too far. And if I'm, I certainly don't want to be a woman putting words in your mouth, but if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is that you want me to kind of renounce Marxist categories, or to...
It's up to you.
Well,
I just want you to do it. I want you to define when the left goes too far. You can do it any way you want.
Like I said, I think that the left goes too far when it is violent or censorious, when it tries to shut people down or no platform them, or when it acts violently. I'm not sure what you expect
Something
beyond
deeper.
that. Something deeper, how?
Yeah. I'd like you to contend with the set of left-wing ideas that produced all the left-wing pathologies of the 20th century, and to define how you think standard left-wing thinking, which has a valuable place, goes too far, since it obviously does.
Has the right gone too far? Has the right gone too far?
Of course the right
How?
has gone
Tell
too
us
far.
how.
Well, how about Auschwitz?
I mean,
Well, I was talking about 20th century
right?
politics.
What else? More recently, what has gone wrong with the right?
Look, I don't like identity politics players at all. I don't care whether they're on the left or the right. I've been lecturing about right-wing extremism for 30 years. I'm no fan of the right, despite the fact that the left would like to paint me that way because it's more convenient
How has the
for
right
them.
gone too far recently?
Well, where? It's threatening to go too far in identitarian Europe, that's for sure. It's gone too far in Charlottesville. It went too far in Norway. Like, how long a list do you want? And why am I required to produce that? To show you that I don't like the identitarian right?
I just thought I'd ask you.
I was actually asking you a question.
Jordan Peterson is able to say, well, you know, fascism, racial supremacy, what happened in Germany, you know, during the Second World War, that's the right going too far. But in no way are the left responding. Like, they can't just go out. They won't say, well, communism could be going too far, like complete communism. They won't say it. They refuse to say it because they are ideologues. Let's get back to it.
I've been fascinated by this conversation. There's been an enormous clash of cultures in the conversation. We've had, you know, classic, if I can call it, huckstering snake oil pulpit talk, which is... It's a mode of discourse, it's a rhetorical style that I find endlessly refreshing and vivifying. I'm sorry that it got a bit heated in places, because I was hoping it wouldn't. I was hoping it would be a shining example of how people of all different kinds of political outlooks can speak with humor and wit and a lightness of touch. As G.K. Chesterton said, angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. And I think it's very important for us, who are privileged, all four of us, privileged to be here, to be asked to be here, to take ourselves a little bit more lightly, not to be too earnest, too pompous, too serious, and not to be too certain. It's a time, I think, for really engaging, emotionally fulfilling, passionate and positive doubt. That's what I would urge. Thank you.
I'm used to, not exclusively white men, who see black intelligence articulated at a certain level, feeling a kind of condescension. If I came up here, Mr. I was saying the other day, but a kind of verbal facility automatically assumed to be a kind of hucksterism and snake oil salesman. I've seen that. I get it. I get hate letters every day from white brothers and sisters who are mad I'm teaching their children. You're just trying to co-opt our children. You're trying to corrupt them. Yes, I'm trying to corrupt them.
So he didn't obviously like being called a huckster and a snake oil salesman, which is what he is. And he's still up here playing the victim, playing the race card, saying he gets letters from white people. And look, maybe he does, that they don't like you, that he's teaching their kids, and that white people don't like to see an intellectual black man. It's like, come on, you're not going to play that card. Look, there's white racists out there. I know that. There's racists of every skin color. That's fair. But like, we've had great black men throughout history. Like, I'm a gigantic Thomas Sowell fan. Like, it's not the norm, all right? There's racists out there, but it's not the norm. And it's not the norm everywhere. No matter where you go in the world, as somebody who's traveled like 60-plus countries, and I've been the minority in most of those countries. The last decade, I've not lived in the West, and I am the minority everywhere I lived, and there's racism everywhere. But it's not the majority of people that are going to be racist. For him to go up there and just play the race card and the victim all the time is ludicrous, especially today, because you're not going to tell me that in the world today we're more racist than we were, 100 years ago, 50 years ago. It's not true. Now let's watch Jordan Peterson say his last speech.
It's part and parcel of this, what would you call it, this ideological catastrophe that's political correctness. I'm not here to argue against progress. I'm not here to argue against equality of opportunity. Anyone with any sense understands that even if you're selfish, you're best served by allowing yourself access to the multiplicitous talents of everyone, and to discriminate against them for arbitrary reasons unrelated to their competences. It's abhorrent. That has nothing to do with the issue at hand. It isn't that good things haven't happened in the past and should continue to happen. That's not the point. The point is the point my compatriot Fry made, which is Well, we can agree on the catastrophe and we can agree on the historic inequity, but there's no way I'm going to agree that political correctness is the way to address any of that, and there's plenty of evidence to the contrary, some of which I would say was displayed quite clearly tonight.
Boom. Mic drop at the end by our boy, Jordan B. Peterson. I wish he did more of these still today. Like, I know he's busy with lots of stuff, and he's part of the Daily Wire now, and he's got, you know, all his public speaking, and he does, the guy's traveling all the time. But I miss watching him in these arenas, yeah, because he was so good at it. And for whether you like Jordan B. Peterson or not, nobody can deny the fact that he's an interesting man to listen to, and he's cultural, he's educated, he's respectful. Doesn't matter if you agree with him or not. That's why these debates are so good, right? Because we can see good debate between two sides. It just so happens that in this case, they weren't willing to budge, right? These are ideologues on one side, you know, political activists, and you know, Fry and JBP are not. Hope you enjoyed this video, guys. I know it's a bit of a longer one. Subscribe to the channel, give it a like, especially if you're here still now, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace out, everybody.